Thank you all for coming tonight. We are delighted to have you here, and I want to give a special shout out to all the new folks who have joined MAMA and to our intrepid chapter leaders around the country who have generously stepped forward to help us build the MAMA movement nationwide. I'm especially delighted to shout out all the folks in Vermont and other places who are having watch parties. And I want to give you one reminder that tonight's conversation is for adults, and we do not recommend that anyone under 18 tune in. Even for adults, the subject matter is likely to give you a stomach ache, but hopefully it will also motivate you to join our grassroots movement of parents, grandparents, and other allies who are fighting back against media addiction and creating a world in which real life experiences and interactions remain at the heart of a healthy childhood. Our kids are addicted to smartphones and social media, and it's got to stop. And they're addicted because all of us, as individual adults, as a society, are obsessed with tech, and we've allowed our kids to have these products, which are designed to be addictive, even before we figured out how to make sure that they were safe. And now our kids' mental health is suffering. I didn't start Mama because a few kids have accidentally been harmed, and it's an inevitable byproduct of otherwise life-saving technologies. No, I started Mama because the leaders of a handful of companies realized they could make more money than Midas by intentionally designing products that are harmful and addictive. And they have deployed these products, which are social media algorithms, despite profound harms to millions of children. It doesn't have to be this way, and we're going to change it. Tonight's guest, the incredible Laura Marquez-Garrett, my sister in the fight to put a stop to what really is the worst collective corporate malfeasance we've seen since Ford decided it was cheaper to pay off families whose loved ones burned to death in the Pintos rather than fix the simple design of their gas tanks to ensure that those cars weren't exploding. Laura Marquez-Garrett is a Harvard Law School graduate who spent the first 20 years of their career in big law, overseeing complex litigation matters and specializing in electronic evidence and forensic investigation. In January of 2022, Laura left their law firm partnership to join a small startup law firm called the Social Media Victims Law Center, or you might hear it referred to as SMVLC. The SMVLC is dedicated to holding social media companies accountable for the harms they're causing to children and families, and it was established by Matthew Bergman. Since then, Laura has met with countless families and initiated more than 300 separate complaints related to social media harms, some of which you'll hear about tonight. Laura has also advocated in support of state and federal level legislation, spoken before the House Energy and Commerce Committee, as well as various panels, podcasts, and films, all in an effort to compel change and hold social media companies accountable. Laura also currently serves on the Fair Play Board of Directors and the Phone Free School Movement Advisory Board, and is a parent of 4. So having this time together is truly an incredible gift. Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate you inviting me here tonight. I mean, it's incredible what you're doing and what you've done already with Mama in a short period of time, really.
Well, there's so much to do, so we're just getting started. So can you tell us how you came to start working at the Social Media Victims Law Center?
Sure. So my journey here started in January 2022. A friend and colleague of mine told me about Matthew Bergman, a very successful plaintiff's attorney in the Seattle area, who had decided he was going to take on big tech and help hold them accountable and force them to make their products safer for kids. I met with Matt. I read his first complaint, and then I watched the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma. If folks haven't seen it, they really should. At the very end, the producers ask, these designers and developers, do you let your kids use these products? And the answer was absolutely not. For me, it all clicked into place, right? So I'm a parent of 4 young children. It's my job to protect those kids. And so 30 days later, I made the move from Big Law, corner office, partner in litigation, to SMVLC.
So what was that first case about that you read that Matt had filed?
Yes, Selena Rodriguez. She, a beautiful 11-year-old child. She dies in July of 2021. Going through her records, right? We have medical records. Typically in litigation, you have medical, school. This is a kid who at age 8 was doing great. She was thriving. She was good at school. She was sleeping at night. She's funny, smart, kind, stubborn, right? Like a lot of kids, fiery. At age 9, her mom gets her an iPad for games, right? These are products that are being marketed to kids. A lot of parents, get them, bring them in their home. And within months, everything's changed. She becomes violent when you try to take away the device. She's not sleeping. She's refusing to get up and go to school. She's engaging in self-harm, having thoughts of suicide. She's being bullied and exploited. It's just this complete change from what her life had been before. In her medical records, there's the statement she makes to doctors, social media makes it hard. Statements that we see through these records of her talking about social media, whether she knows it or not. Her mom tries everything, reaches out to school administrators, doctors, law enforcement. Nobody can really figure out how to help this kid. In July 2021, she posts to Snapchat. She takes 2 pills, she makes the peace sign, and she's gone. That was the first complaint our firm filed, and we have seen that fact pattern over and over in the 2.5 years since.
It's so heartbreaking. And, you and I have heard a lot of these stories now, but I think a lot of parents maybe are not familiar with these cases. Since Selena's case, I know you've had other cases where children were served through social media algorithms, horrific content. Can you tell the audience about Mason and Anna?
Yeah, so we've seen, I mean, we work with over almost 3,000 families now, right? And that's just in 2.5 years. That's crazy. So Mason Edens, 16-year-old in Arkansas, like many families, parents are checking devices from time to time. They confiscate them. No outward signs or symptoms of issues. He goes through a bad breakup. And in the course of weeks, not months, his TikTok feed, unbeknownst to his family or friends, goes from sort of the typical things that we expect to see to just a deluge of heartbreak and suicide promoting content. He is searching for things based on the data we've seen, like inspirational quotes. That's an exact search he runs in November 2022. And he is getting on his For You page these nonstop videos about heartbreak and advocating suicide by gun, right? November 2022, his mom's concerned. They're talking about getting him in therapy, but don't know the source of these issues. Mom takes the phone. He reacts violently, uncharacteristically. He leaves, goes to his room, and 15 minutes later, he's gone. He dies by suicide, right? Anna Schott, 18-year-old in Colorado. About a year before she dies, TikTok sends her a live video of somebody dying by suicide. That, by the way, is not uncommon. Live suicides and murders, I've spoken to dozens of kids now who have seen those multiple times. I'm not going to say it's every kid, but it's a significant percentage that are getting targeted with this terrible stuff that most adults have never seen. So Anna starts seeing a counselor. She tells her best friend she just can't get this video out of her head. There's even a journal page that says TikTok at the top. And she's got these quotes of really disturbing content that TikTok is pushing to her, right? It's the opposite of what she wants. Now she tries to quit Instagram, TikTok, the other platforms. Like a lot of kids, she feels physically unable to stop. She'll delete it. A week later, she'll bring it back when she can't handle it anymore. November 2020, 2 years before Mason, she also dies by suicide.
I want to make sure the audience here tonight understands this. A child might search for one thing, like literally type the words inspirational quote and get sent pro-suicide content. How is this possible?
So these are design and programming results, right? This isn't about user choice. And, when we talk about the litigation, we talk about state and federal legislation. We're not talking about 12-year-olds who open social media accounts to find drugs and self-harm. In fact, I talk to a lot of 12-year-olds or young people who were 12, and they say, look, I'd never even heard about drugs. And then I opened a Snapchat and boom, my feed is filled with drug content. Snap is recommending plugs, which is a word that means drug dealers, right? It's the drug dealers online. And they're making it look cool and they're making it look safe and everyone looks harmless, right? And we hear this over and over. So these are about companies that have no oversight, no regulation, and they are making these choices for our kids so they can make more money. Just fundamentally, these platforms work differently for children than adults, and we see this every day. So for the adults out there, don't listen to us, right? Go buy a burner phone, go buy a couple burner phones, $50 at Target, and you can get all set up. And I know that because a lot of kids are doing that when their parents say no social media, right? Get a burner phone, set them up as a 14-year-old. Don't run searches, don't seek out connections, just passively scroll. I want to add is for the why, like go look at those publicly disclosed Facebook documents that came out in late 2021. The one that comes to mind and that has been one of the most shocking for me, and again, it's publicly disclosed, is a huge marketing document from Meta. It talks about how their only opportunity for growth are the 4 million new teens that start on the internet each year. Skip a few pages forward, there are pictures of brains with arrows talking about the frontal cortex. And they say kids are highly emotional and, quote, very vulnerable because of that, the undeveloped frontal cortex. Turn the page. Here's how we can change our product to engage these kids, right? And these are direct quotes. Invent new interaction types that produce a feeling of shared experiences. That's one. How about incorporate lower quality content in their discovery experiences? That's two, right? I mean, this is something these companies are doing on purpose. They are targeting kids and rewarding predatory behavior for one reason. It makes money.
I came to this work because I had done a lot of reporting on suicide and, talking about suicide, talking about depression, talking about horrible things makes people feel horrible. And depression can become contagious. And over, I've heard from victims' families how shocked they were and how angry they were because their child, who might have had a bad day, because we all have bad days, and looked for something that was sad, was then inundated with more content that was sort of encouraging them to be depressed and encouraging them, in some cases, to be suicidal. There is a TED Talk that came out in 2018 that I think every parent should watch called The Nightmare Videos of Children's YouTube. In it, the writer and artist James Bridle shows how the algorithms on YouTube will eventually lead to the most twisted and dark content you can imagine. You start with sort of the most innocent seeming child cartoons, and before you know it, you're watching videos that are like so dark with cartoon characters who are engaging in violence, sadistic sexual activity, really the most depraved kinds of things you can't even imagine. And the link is in the chat for those of you who want to watch later. But Laura, can you tell us about sort of the other facets of how social media algorithms are designed in a harmful way?
Yeah, and honestly, there's so many of them, right? We don't have enough time. It's the algorithms, it's the features, it's the gamification, the streaks, the scores, the trophies, literally rewarding children, saying, hey, these aren't strangers, these are your friends. You want to be popular? Add them, right? This is who we recommend. These people are great. You'll love them. You have things. So it's the whole design. But I will say, because look, yes, to all of these extreme outcomes, we see these at SMVLC. But I actually want to answer by talking about, just two of the less extreme outcomes that I think people really need to watch out for. So one, addiction, right? YouTube Kids, these other platforms, these are designed to be addictive. You have continuous scroll features. You have these short clips, which are meant to sort of give these little dopamine hits and cause attention issues, right? It's immediate gratification. These are not TV shows or movies. Also, the speed of the algorithm. They are learning in real time what will get kids' attention. Now, when I started this work 2.5 years ago, started with SMVLC, my 4-year-old at the time, we used to give her, look, I'm going to say 30 minutes of screen time. In reality, I'm sure she got more. Many days, we all go through that. And those 30 minutes, she would watch YouTube Kids. Well, harmless, right? I mean, YouTube, our kids had it on the TV and we didn't even know how it got there. It probably came pre-installed. It was on our phones. It looks like a kid's show. When I started this work and talking to experts, not just hearing stories from families, but experts who told me, hey, this is what they're actually doing to your child's brain. I came home and said, hey, we have to get YouTube out of the house. So Julie, it took us probably a month to wean our 4-year-old child off of YouTube, because when I tried to just take it away, it was a complete meltdown. That was not our child. It was, I'm going to try and break everything in the house. I thought 30 minutes, you can't get addicted to 30 minutes. So number one, addiction that we don't see coming. And frankly, had I not done the work I was doing at the time, I probably would have thought, oh, it's not that bad and just given in. It's only 30 minutes, right? Number two, these recommendation harms can be really subtle. It's not always this pro-suicide content, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with a parent who recently found out her 12-year-old child had been accessing YouTube on the school Chromebook. And it had been a couple of weeks. right? So we talked about it and I said, hey, have you noticed any changes over those 2 weeks? And it was like a little light bulb went on. And she said, oh, actually, now that you mention it, she started asking for skin creams and lotions, right? So you've got this beautiful 12-year-old child with perfect skin who all of a sudden, as she's accessing YouTube sort of in secret, is starting to feel less sure about herself. Watch out for those, right? It's not always the giant red flags. Sometimes it's those small changes that build up. It's the makeups, the foods, the exercise routines. It's kids, all of a sudden, they don't like their hair, their skin. They don't shower as often. It's also, frankly, young kids who all of a sudden are making racist, violent, misogynistic, homophobic statements that seem to come out of nowhere. Watch for those. Those are algorithmic harms. Those are just a couple, right?
Those are just a couple. What are dark patterns? Can you explain that to
Yeah.
everyone?
Yeah, so dark patterns are tricks that these companies build into their systems. So they are interface designs and sort of mechanisms that are meant to get you to do something you otherwise might not do, or to stop doing something you otherwise would. So for example, if you open a Snapchat account, it will say, can we have access to your device contacts? You'll say no. It'll ask again, you'll say no. I mean, over and over, it's sort of the let's wear them down until they say yes. In addition to the harassment, though, what you will get is a screen that says, allow or don't allow. And then behind it, you'll have this other screen that's sort of faded. And if you look closely, it actually says, just click allow or something like that, right? Just hit allow. There's all of this subliminal messaging, the placement, you will find with these apps that when you, the permissions, when you give them access, it's green and big, right? When you're trying to limit access, when you're trying to implement safety steps, it will be grayed out or red, and it will take 5 steps. I tried to turn the notifications on my Facebook off once. It took 4 tries, and I still sometimes get notifications. That is a deliberate design decision that is meant to get you to do what they want you to do.
Even the educational programs, my son was using Duolingo, and I heard from another parent how their child was getting emails saying, where have you been? We miss you, like trying to guilt the child for not spending more time on the app. There's all of these designs, these intentional efforts to make children spend more time online and to prevent them from having a healthier relationship and spending less time. I mean, really, what it sounds like you're saying is that these products are designed in a harmful way, in a faulty way. Is that right?
100%. Look, these social media platforms, these are not the 1996 internet that many of us came to know and love, right? And that's the internet where you can search for things, you can find things, then you can simply turn it off and get back to your life, right? That internet was about access. It was about user control. It was about resources. Social media platforms, these are health harming products. So, look, last year after 4 deaths, every single model of an electronic skateboard, I can't remember the brand, but it was recalled, right? Even with a product that actually helps people, take an airplane, for example. If one airplane, not even crashing, if one airplane was making emergency landings every day, right? A really frightening situation. And I don't know what that is. It's probably like 0.001% of flights or less. Many of us would rethink air travel, right? So these platforms aren't the internet. And it's not about third-party speech. It's about the fact that these products are defective, that these companies are designing them to make more money at the expense of our kids and us.
So, I've heard people compare social media to motor vehicles, claiming like if we have a concern about cars, we don't just take them off the road, we put seat belts in, saying that the same should be true for social media products. Based on what you've seen, does that sound right to you? Do you like that analogy?
No, this is a dangerous narrative, and there's a lot of dangerous narratives, right? Like comparing social media to food, not drugs. When everything we are seeing as our kids are literally will die by suicide because you take their phone, right? Same thing with this analogy. It's dangerous because it gives big tech the benefit of every doubt. So 2 points I'd make on that. One is in law and in society, we employ like risk utility or risk benefit tests, right? The more dangerous something is, the more we need it to justify its use. So motor vehicles have high utility. Too many examples I mean, look, if you're in an accident, they take you to the hospital, right? Entire communities have been built because of motor vehicles. It's allowed us to travel, etc. Now, the bait and switch here is that social media is not and never has been the internet, right? Social media is convenient. It's good for business. But the important point is that the connectivity, the resources, the biggest benefits that social media tries to take credit for, we had those with the internet. I remember 1996. So I would actually say maybe, it's not a Subaru, that's the internet, right? All these cars out there that we actually use and need. It would be more like a sporty one-seater car that is being made available on every street corner for free, right? It's novel, it's cool. It doesn't actually contribute to anything, and you could take it off the street and you'd still have cars. Now, the second point, and why I think it's really dangerous, is that it grossly understates the danger of these products. So big tech would love to say, hey, it's one or two fixes, right? We'll do this and it'll be fine. That's not all the automobile industry does. And we're forgetting. There's reinforced steel and solid design meant to protect riders. There's crash testing, automatic brakes, power steering, hundreds of safety features that these automobile companies are building into these products because they need to be as safe as they reasonably can be. Versus social media platforms, which frankly are probably the most dangerous thing on the road for our kids. It is like a car with paper mache, brakes that don't work, steering. I mean, it's just, there's no safety features currently. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, let's go into the laws for a second, because that's one of the things that's allowed this to happen, right? It's Section 230. Can you explain what Section 230 is for those who haven't heard of it?
Sure, and it's a great topic to get into. It was enacted shortly after the birth of the internet. It was referred to as the Good Samaritan Law. So Section 230 was actually meant to incentivize these companies to implement protections for children to ensure user control. Essentially what it says is these companies, these online service providers, cannot be liable for what third parties do on their platforms. And so what we wanted as a society, we wanted internet companies at the time. I think Netscape was the biggest at the time, right? We had electronic bulletin boards. We want them to take down bad stuff and not get in trouble if they miss something. The problem is that the technologies today, the stuff we are talking about, these are not search engine algorithms, right? These are social media algorithms. These are mechanisms, communications. None of this existed in 1996. So none of it was addressed in Section 230. Even the algorithms, again, it's different programming. So these companies operate in a black box. They said their tech was safe. They said, hey, we're connecting all of you. This is great. Only a small number of insiders knew the truth. And they essentially got to ride the internet's coattails and got away with it.
What do you mean these companies operate in a black box? Can you explain that?
Sure. So when Section 230 is around, we have no legislation. We have no oversight. And so just assuming that what these companies were doing was similar to what the internet had been doing, which it's not, they were allowed and able to operate from 1996 until today with no oversight, no
There's
regulation.
no oversight, and they basically enjoy immunity that, for example, a newspaper does not. At a newspaper, there is regulations. You cannot libel someone. If you go online, and if I libel you on Twitter, and Twitter takes that and promotes it and sends it to 1 million people, you can't complain to Twitter. You have no legal recourse with Twitter. Is that correct? You have to sue the person, and I don't know if you even can.
Yeah. So that's what they claim, right? And that's what these lawsuits are challenging. That we're saying, look, in general, yes, that's how it's been because people didn't understand these technologies, right? And I believe it was actually meant for things like libel, like to prevent us from suing these platforms when they weren't the ones speaking. There are, of course, always exceptions, but that's really what we're trying to show is that, look, this is wrong. This is not how Section 230 was written. It's not how it was meant to be applied. It was basically a sleight of hand that these companies pulled that have allowed them to get away with this.
And it, and a social media platform is not a neutral space in the sense that a phone line is a neutral space. If I pick up the phone and I call a friend and I plan a bank robbery, no one would think that Verizon is responsible for that. But what's different about social media is their algorithms are in fact designed to amplify the worst content, to amplify the hate speech, to amplify whatever is most extreme, most violent, most salacious. And that's what's one of the things that's harming children.
They are amplifying, right? Like they are making deliberate decisions despite knowing the harm they're causing. And, back in October 2023, one of the courts in the federal proceeding had asked them, hey, what's your duty, your basic duty to design towards these kids to design a safe product? And what the attorney for these companies said is no such duty exists under the law. They are claiming both 230, which is supposed to protect these companies as to third-party speech, and they're claiming the First Amendment, which is meant to protect their speech, right? So they're claiming both. And then they're essentially saying we are the only industry in the history of the United States of America that is untouchable. And that's what's allowed them to get away with this for so long.
So this crisis of this totally dangerous information environment that is social media has affected not only our children, but our democracy, with foreign actors utilizing social media to create strife. Citizens now get their news from social media and they can't differentiate between professional journalism and bunk. I personally think mainstream media deserves some of the blame for the problem because they have rushed to put their journalism onto social media platforms, which makes it even harder to differentiate. But there have been many groups working now for years trying to change the laws and hold social media accountable. Yet in DC, not a single law regulating social media has passed since 1998. Why do you think that is, Laura Marquez-Garrett?
So look, and don't quote me on the numbers, right? I don't know the exact numbers. My understanding is that last year, big tech spent more than $20 million on lobbyists in DC.
30 million,
Over
according
30.
to issue one. Yep.
Thank you. So they're fighting tooth and nail. I actually think Senator Hawley put it best in one of these hearings when he said something to the effect of, look, every one of our politicians, every one of our senators, every one of our politicians should be required to disclose every penny they've taken from big tech. They should have to disclose every gift, every trip. How about every immediate family member who works for big tech? How about stock? How about essentially any conflict that may be changing the outcome, right? What we know is kids are dying. And the majority of Americans are begging, not just asking, begging Congress to do something, to act. And right now we have got 70 senators who have spoken out in support of KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act. And my understanding is there's one senator currently from Kentucky, right, Rand Paul, who is blocking our ability to take a vote. That doesn't seem very democratic. I don't know the political process well enough to understand exactly how that could possibly happen, but here it is.
And amazingly, those 70 co-sponsors are tripartisan, Republicans, Democrats, and an
100%.
independent. So this isn't even a political issue. There is widespread agreement. So what about in court? These tech companies have a lot of money. Does that make it harder for your cases to proceed?
We knew, look, this is why everyone thought Matthew Bergman was crazy, right? Because they're like, man, you're going to go up against the world's largest tech companies, most resourced, most influential. And he said, absolutely, I am. Absolutely. And so he rushed in headlong. We knew to expect it. Yes. Look, they've got all the lawyers they could ever need from the biggest firms across the country. They've got lobbyists. They've got donations they make to educational institutions. And they have been hiring researchers, politicians, professors, anyone and everyone they could to further their goal for years. I always like to say, people say David and Goliath, but this is not Goliath. I would take Goliath in a heartbeat. This is more like Leviathan, right? This is like something we have never seen. And so look, everyone who cares about a child, now's the time. Ask questions, speak up. The legal system takes time. I mean, the complaint I mentioned earlier, Selena Rodriguez, we filed that in January of 2022. We are just now getting into discovery in these cases that have been filed across the country. That's 2.5 years. The legal system takes time. We need people to get involved. With Mama, right? You mentioned Mama, Fair Play for Kids, incredible organization. Look them up online. The phone free schools movement.
Yep.
They're coming out next week with a toolkit for school administrators that will help it so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Go look for that. Go find it. Help these kids, like do something.
The tactics that big tech lobbies use are coming up again and again and again. We just managed to pass this legislation in New York, but it got a little harried there at the end. Can you talk about some of the tactics that you've seen? I can certainly share some examples.
And so many, right?
So many.
How long do we have? So look, number one, if we want to talk legislation, weaponizing marginalized groups, right? They're going out and fear mongering and basically saying, oh, this could hurt LGBTQ youth. In 2.5 years of doing this work, I've met a lot of LGBTQ youth, and these platforms are the ones causing the harm. And I know there's studies out that talk about that, how they're targeting them because of their vulnerabilities. And more importantly, Kids Online Safety Act, it's not about content moderation. You could have a company that never takes down a single piece of content and fully complies with KOSA, and another one that takes down everything anyone can find offensive and doesn't. And that's what these tech companies don't want us to talk about. I mentioned another one a moment ago, hiring researchers and scientists, right? Somebody comes out and starts to stand up to them. They say, oh, we need you. Here's a whole lot of money. And then basically they're not allowed to do much of anything. I know I've heard them try to claim like, oh, look, 20% of kids. I don't know if it's like we benefit them or they say they like us or whatever the case may be. But again, in reality, the internet is the one that provided connectivity. And I always ask, like, are you sure? Look, we weren't testing happiness back in 1999 because we didn't need to, because kids weren't dying at record rates. I suspect that 20% is not, this is how many people the internet, or sorry, social media makes happy, but this is what's left after social media has brought that number from 80 to 20, right? It's just more of the same.
Yes, I mean that, weaponizing marginalized groups is one of the ones that's been hardest to stomach for me, because marginalized, people who are members of marginalized groups are actually more at risk online. There's evidence that they experience more harassment. LGBTQ kids might be solicited more often, bullied more often, and those kids deserve protection just like every other kid. And there is truth in the sense that if you have a marginalized background and maybe you don't have someone in your physical community that you feel connected to, that maybe you could find connection online. But just as you said, it doesn't need to be on a social media platform. The internet can do that. GLAD, PFLAG, Trevor Project, they can all have communities.
Well, I did that in 96, right? So when the internet becomes popular, I'm off to college and I am questioning. And so look, as a member of the LGBTQ community, yeah, 100%. The internet was great. That's where I found resources. I found chat groups. I found bulletin boards. I met other queer youth in Canada, right? Something I would never have been able to do in 1993. So that's part of the issue, is that those resources are there. These social media companies are harming our LGBTQ youth, and the connectivity, it's already there. It's called the internet.
It's already there. So one other, argument that I'll bring up that they use is weaponizing free speech. So that's what happened in California. They passed the Kids Code, which is the age appropriate design code, which establishes a duty of care to social media product makers, that they design their products in a way that keeps kids safe. So for example, it required social media platforms that had more than 1 million users to ensure the privacy settings were the most private. As a parent, you're Kim Kardashian, you want your kid to be contacted by strangers, you can go in there and make it public. But the default settings were the most private. The law passed, it was supposed to go into effect this January, and one of the big lobby groups sued, claiming it was a violation of their free speech. Legal scholars have said that that's completely crazy. That's not the purpose of the First Amendment, but yet here we are, and that, law has not taken effect. So that's something people hear free speech, they react to it, and big tech has a lot of money to spend trying to convince people that the law is somehow violating rights when it's not.
And that's why content moderation is a great red herring, right? Because if they keep talking about content moderation, one, making them content moderators actually puts them in the position of deciding what we see and hear, right? It gives them the power, it keeps it with them. Number two, and these companies know this, it's not about content, right? The harms that are being caused by content, we're not talking about the kids that are opening social media accounts to find drugs and self-harm. They will find that stuff. It's out there. As much as I dislike that as a parent, right? We are talking about platform features, platform designs, incentivizing kids. I mean, Snapchat literally gives kids rewards for adding complete strangers. It's called, you can up your score. You have more people on your Snap Map. You get trophies, you get charms. This is not about the First Amendment, and it never was.
So before we get to Q&A, because I know the audience has many questions for you, let's talk about schools and school-issued devices. In my travels, I have heard about children using school-issued iPads or laptops to research suicide methods. I've heard about kids getting access to pornography through Google Classroom. What are you seeing, Laura?
We need schools to start pushing back on big tech and to take a closer look at what's happening. I have screenshots of a Discord account that a 14-year-old is accessing in class. Right? She's literally saying, I can only talk at school. My parents have me on a Gab phone. They have shut down the Wi-Fi. This is a child whose parents are trying to get her help every way they can. And they actually go to the school and say, look, she cannot have unmonitored access. She has a problem with social media. The school says, look, we put software on there. We're doing our best. For every software, there's a workaround software. This is not a choice. Your child takes the device or does not move to the next level, right? And we hear this over and over. These screenshots are horrific. They are a 14-year-old girl who is actively being exploited while in school, whose parents have done everything possible to get their child help. And the school has said, nothing we can do. We work with a mother who lost her child from fentanyl poisoning through a Snapchat drug distribution situation. She also went to the school before her child died and said, I have Snapchat locked down. My child has a problem. Take this back. He cannot have access to Snapchat. And they said, no can do, right? This is our curriculum. He's gone. More and more we're seeing this. I told a story a little bit ago about a young woman who was on YouTube, right? So at what point do our schools have a responsibility to these kids? I mean, these technologies, they're convenient. They are easy to use. They are not safe, right? They are harmful products. And if these manufacturers, if Google will not provide schools with safe products, we need to push back on Google. Imagine what would happen if every school went to Google and said, hey, I want my money back. This product is defective. Do we really think that Google cannot simply lock down YouTube? Right? Of course they can. But for those who may not know, YouTube is actually owned by Google. So every time a kid's getting on, that's money for Google. And I want to raise one more issue because it's not just devices. And this is sort of a new thing that I was not aware of previously. It's also what's called EdTech, education technology. So back in May, there were 2 complaints filed by the EdTech Law Center. One is against PowerSchool, right? PowerSchool says, hey, we're in 90% of US school districts, 50 million kids globally. Keep an eye on that complaint. What is in that complaint should enrage us. It enraged me. Given what I do for a living, given every step I take at home, I thought my kids were safe. I thought I had social media figured out. I read this complaint, right? This information that is in here about the stuff they are collecting on kids. And it made me see red because I was wrong, right? And so what I would say about everything we've talked about, why aren't we hitting the brakes so we can find out what these companies are doing and why before we let them keep exploiting our kids?
It's, at Mama, we're starting with the 3-point mission, which is parent education, getting phones out of school, and demanding safeguards. But getting phones out of school is really just the first step in addressing what you brought up, which is this crisis of quote unquote ed tech. UNESCO issued a report last year in which they looked all around the world at all of the schools that were using technology. And what they found was that there was zero evidence that the presence of technology in a classroom actually resulted in improved academic outcomes. And the only exception they could find was a single study in the US that was produced by a manufacturer of one of these edtech products. So, there's this narrative that's very popular in our culture that unless you use technology early, your kids are going to be somehow, quote unquote, left behind. And it's kind of crazy, right? Like you want your kid to start driving at 16, but nobody thinks we put 8-year-olds behind the wheel so that they won't be left behind. Nobody thinks kids should have sex earlier so that they'll be more ready to have sex when they're, at an appropriate age. It's craziness.
Well, and I was actually talking to someone the other day about the ed tech, right? And she told me a scenario where a parent had made, a number of parents had made these FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act requests back in 2021 on some of these sort of school tech companies. One of these parents, I think it was maybe Minnesota, got back over 2,000 files in response. It included baby photos of her child. It included school assignments. It even included videos of this child in her physical education class. Like that is just a preview, right? And the reality is that parents have no idea this is happening. I would even say, look, to every parent listening, and go to your school. Go to your school tomorrow, or I guess it's summer, right? But go to your school the first day and say, hey, what ed tech products are you using? What data is being collected for my child? I want a complete list. I want to know what is happening with my kids' information. We have a right to that. I mean, this is insane.
So we have some questions coming in, and this is a really good question from Nikki Reisberg, who's the podcaster at Scrolling to Death. And she asked, is an Apple Watch safe for my 9-year-old?
It's a great question, and I don't have the definitive answer. What I will tell you is that sadly, so I recently tried to set up an Apple Watch for a child. I went through the process. I input the age. I got the whole, okay, this is a child account. You now have to verify you're an adult. And then it looks like you're done with the process and you can use the watch. And so 99% of people are going to say, oh, great, it's safe. It's set up for a kid. Apple knows it's a kid, etc. Because of the work I do, I always go back and check every possible clickable setting. I check everything. When I did that, I am sad to report that everything was set to the most permissive settings. Internet access, marketing from Apple was set to yes, please allow. Additionally, gaming, multiplayer gaming, and every permissible setting, allowing them to chat with strangers, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think right now there are not maybe many products available that are going to really keep our kids safe. We have to be diligent, but it's also not just about parents, right? In that scenario, as a consumer, I should be able to rely on Apple saying, okay, we know this is for a kid, so we are going to put you in a safe setting. Same thing with like the Kindle Fires. We had those at one point. We phased them out of my house after this work started, because even though I was paying for a monthly subscription and had the age setting for the youngest setting, somehow my child was getting YouTube videos through this thing that I was paying. You cannot trust these products. You must. It's
Laura,
crazy.
one of my sons was addicted to his screen on his phone at one point, and he overrode the screen time limits using one more minute for 6 hours.
Yep.
And when I saw that, I'm a journalist, I'm like, wait a minute, there has to be a way to turn this off. And if you Google it, it's not even hard to find. You will find hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of requests from parents to Apple saying, how can you allow this one more minute feature? My child is abusing it. So, you can't trust it. We're smart people and we know how to do these settings. They don't work.
What about your smart TVs? Like, we all have smart TVs now. I would challenge every parent to go and delete YouTube and see if your kid, I mean, challenge your kid, hey, get it back on the TV. And I don't know, maybe some TVs have those features. I have not seen it. It's, how is it possible that we've got this really expensive TV that does all these cool things, but it can't simply lock out YouTube, right? And look, the answer is, it's the same reason why a flip phone will cost you $140, but a smartphone is free. Right. Because these companies are all making money off of our harm.
So another question here, how do we protect our children if they're just going to get access to social media on their school device or their friend's device or a burner device? Obviously, it's a very hard question to answer.
That's what we're trying with litigation. That's what we're trying with legislation. And that's why we need the grassroots efforts, right? Because these other pieces will take a long time. There are going to be a lot of hurdles. The answer is that you do the best you can. You give yourself grace as parents. I talk to parents on a daily basis, sometimes just parents that I meet out in the world, and I hear their stories about like, man, I deleted YouTube and then somehow it got back on, and I can't just keep my kid in his room forever. I'm thinking about getting rid of TVs. I did this, I did that. It is exhausting. And so I would just say to parents, know that you're not alone. You do the best you can and you give yourself grace, because these companies are designing these products to make sure that you cannot protect your child. That's what we need to change. We need to change what these companies are doing.
We need to change what the companies are doing. And I also think we need to change the narrative around the way we think about these products. So for example, I wanted my youngest son to have an Apple Watch because I didn't want him to have a phone. We tried setting it up. Not only were the permissions wrong, but somehow because it was a parent account, all 3,000 of my contacts ended up on his watch, including emergency numbers for my employer and stuff. And it took me weeks and weeks and months, and they couldn't solve the problem. It's like, and then I'm like, what am I doing? And, we realized even without the watch, like in case of an emergency, everybody around him has a phone. He can go to someone and call us, right? So, this idea that you need to always be connected to your child, it's kind of unhealthy. I mean, let me rephrase. it is unhealthy. It's not appropriate. That's one reason I found parents are sometimes saying they want their child to have the phone in school because parent thinks, oh, I need constant contact. Well, actually, no, like you need to allow your child to separate. And one very appropriate place for them to separate is in school, right? That is an environment where they're with adults, it's structured, it's safe. And if there's an emergency, you call the office, just like we have for, decades.
And look, I'm going to say, it's supposed to be safe. Going back to what we just talked about, one of the problems is that school is no longer a safe place for kids because of social media, because of ed tech, because of school issued devices, because of schools that don't have these phone-free policies. Like, please, please, like, protect these kids. School is supposed to be someplace that's safe. It's supposed to be a place where you learn. I will tell you, from the schools that have gone phone free so far, and I don't know if this is every school, but generally what I'm hearing is even the kids that were most resistant are now understanding why this matters. They are happier. They have a break. Even the ones that go home and then they're on social media all night, they have a break during the day, and it is giving them a little bit of breathing room.
I mean, there was a study when they asked kids, how much would we have to pay you to quit your social media account? And, they needed something like $60 or something to give up TikTok. But then when they asked them, well, what if all the kids gave up their social media account? And the respondents were like, well, I'd pay money for that, because just being relieved, and not having this sort of obligation.
This is problematic use, right? I mean, it goes to some of the publicly disclosed Meta documents where you have Meta people talking about literally like, hey, we're asking kids, and a lot of them no longer even enjoy being on Instagram, right? They feel like they have to. They don't want to, but they do. And I meet kids like that all the time. Kids that are being relentlessly bullied, and you ask them, why? Why do you, and tears running down their face? I don't know. Ask them, if I gave you $500, would you stop using these platforms for a month, a year? These kids will have physical reactions. You will see them shake. They'll be like, oh my God, my heart is beating. No, I can't do it. It's panic, agitation. Look, we have cases when we talk about addiction, and this is different for many adults, right? When you take my phone, it's upsetting. It will make me anxious, right? But I'll get past it. We're talking about children. We're talking about 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Many of these kids, when you take that device, they become agitated, angry, depressed, violent, self-harm. We have cases, we have a 15-year-old who told his family, you made me lose my snap streaks, right before he died by suicide. We have a 14-year-old who wrote in her suicide note, you never should have taken my phone. How are we allowing this as a society, right? How are we allowing this to happen? We see there's an issue. We may not know exactly how it's happening, why it's happening, where it's happening, but we all see that there's an issue. How are we allowing this to continue?
We all see that there's an issue, and it's, again, there's a great question here. How do we make the shift into collective action so the majority of kids don't have phones and they figure out how to navigate real life without them? Or is that a crazy thought?
No, it's you go to the phone-free school movement, right? Next week when they come out with their administrator toolkit, if you are a school administrator, go look at it, right? Go see what they've got in there, see what you can do to help create change on your end. If you are a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, if you are just an adult who cares about a kid, right? Look up Fair Play, Childhood Beyond Brands. Look up Mama, right? Look up all these different grassroots movements, these efforts, these organizations. They're out there. We just need people to show up, and we need people to care about this issue. And we need people to not just say, well, it's probably too difficult to change anyway. No, like, these are our kids. We need to make a change. We need to fix this.
And it's also, I think, doing this work, changing the narrative around it. I mean, I've said before, when you go to a toy store to buy a toy for your child, if on the package it said, there's a 1 in 8 chance that your child will become depressed after using the toy, or a 1 in 12 chance that they're going to be suicidal or start cutting themselves, or, 1 in 10, they'll develop an eating disorder, who would buy that toy? Nobody, right?
No one would buy the toy. And this is worse because now they're actually, instead of selling that toy at the store, they're going to every middle school in the country and saying, here, kid, you can have it for free. I'm just going to make money by sticking advertising on the side, right? They're literally ensuring the way they are designing, the way they are distributing. I mean, we see data in the litigation, right? We're seeing some of this data now on the other side, and you will have a kid who opens 30 Instagram accounts, right, on a device. Like they have that device ID. Meta has it, Snap has it, Google has it, TikTok has it. They know when a kid has opened 30 accounts on a device. They also all have these algorithms that are meant to estimate age. They know when a minor is claiming to be an adult. And they use that information for marketing purposes, advertising, right? They will acknowledge that they are under 18. When it comes to safety, they say, well, how are we supposed to know that? This is what they're doing, and they're doing it knowingly.
In the lawsuits that the attorneys general filed last year that you mentioned, these the unredacted copies came out, and there was all of this incredible stuff. And one of the facts was, Meta had actually been measuring the number of 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds who were still on Instagram at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. on school nights. So they know that underage children are using their products. A good question here from someone else: why isn't there more interest from schools to work on this issue? It seems like teachers agree, though, because they're on the receiving end themselves. I don't know if you saw the story in the New York Times this week about, some kids at a school created fake accounts, pretended to be teachers, and, put all kinds of inappropriate content there. And the teachers are horrified. I read that and I was thinking, children have always done pranks. That's appropriate for children to do silly things. But when you put it on the internet, of course, it becomes much more serious, has much greater ramifications. Why do you think schools are not doing more on this issue?
Well, and I want to make a distinction between teachers and schools, because I'll tell you, the teachers, the individuals that I have spoken with, when we've talked about this, when I've said, look, if schools don't start doing something, at some point, they're going to get pulled right into one of these lawsuits, not as a plaintiff, right? You're going to have some parent who says, please stop giving my kid this device. The kid gets taken, the kid, like terrible things. And that school is going to be pulled into the middle of it. And when I talk to teachers individually, I don't know, but the ones I've spoken to have said, please, we need to do something. A lot of teachers, but they don't have the power, right? They don't. So then you talk about administrators. And even there, I don't know the nuances, but it's okay. Is this the district level administrator? Is this, we have got to show up in force, right? We have got to stand outside these schools. We've got to challenge everything. We've got to help these teachers. These teachers need our help. They want our help. Right? A teacher doesn't want to sit there and try to monitor 40 kids on a device they don't actually need. They want to teach. And so we need to help them. Parents need to help them. We can make that change. We just have to get it started.
There's a comment in here from Julie Liddell saying, parents can refuse to let children use school devices until they're made safe and until the school discloses all relevant data practices.
Yep.
That is your legal right as a parent.
I would do that. I would do that. And look, does it mean that maybe your kid doesn't have a device? Maybe. Does it mean that maybe your kid loses some time? Maybe. But it gives us a chance to fix this, right?
Right. Absolutely. I'm going to put a message in the chat. Maybe Katerina, you can share it. There's more information from Julie Liddell at edtech.law. Okay, last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Considering that these, reporting features are flawed, meaning that even when you report a harm, they don't automatically respond. Is it worth reporting harmful content? What do you think about that?
Yes. So number one, they're more than flawed. They are deliberately defective. There are no 1-800 numbers. We have data where, predators that were sextorting kids were reported. And we have a parent who actually found dozens of accounts that are the same person after that person sextorted his child. And Meta said, oh, sorry, these other accounts aren't violating our terms of service. There was no concern, no action that was appropriate. So first of all, and same with drug dealers on Snapchat, right? Where a dealer is reported over and over and then 10 kids are gone. 10 kids have died and Snapchat has done nothing in terms of taking that dealer down the moment they know. So one, those mechanisms are more than defective. Now that said, this is where we have to push for change. And so what I would say is take screenshots and report and record the reporting and report it by mail, if we can put enough pressure on these companies to leave no doubt whatsoever, you knew this was happening. Actually, think about it. If if 100,000 parents were to go out there and start taking screenshots and opening accounts and reporting, reporting predators and doing that, and then recording all that, We put all that out there, right? And say, well, Meta, that's really funny because I just reported someone 20 times and you did nothing. We need to do it. So yeah, is it hopeless right now? We need to change that. And the way we change it is by reporting it until these companies are sick and tired and have to do something.
Amen. So, Laura, I mean, for everyone here, to wrap up, I mean, I want you to know that Laura here is really one of my heroes because they are on the front lines of standing up to big tech, demanding they make their products safe, or more accurately, that we don't allow them to intentionally harm our kids for money. And you spend every day dealing with tragedy, and I know how exhausting it can be. And I appreciate so much how tirelessly you and Matt work. So your kids, my kids, all of our kids can be safer. Is there any final words you want to leave us with tonight? I really want you to have the closing word here.
Yeah, look, we've covered a lot. Just know we have the right to demand answers. We have the right to be heard. Please get involved, advocate, ask questions. It's not even, it's telling Rand Paul, write to him, call him and say, look, I'm not even telling you to vote yes for COSA. Just let us get a vote. That's what democracy is about. That's what our country is supposed to be about. Take videos, take photos. I think we have this window of opportunity to really make change. We just have to go out and take it.
Well, we're doing it at Mama. You're doing it at the Social Media Victims Law Center. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are taking a break from the Expert Insight series next month for August. We already have amazing guest book for the fall, so please stay tuned on our website, joinmama.org, to hear about the September event. And in the meantime, I hope everyone goes outside and spends as much time off their screens as possible. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Laura, thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Appreciate it.